You want to know one of the biggest ways to bore your audience? Put a bunch of data on a slide or talk about a bunch of numbers. A lot of times you have to present numbers, I get that, but you want to turn those numbers into narrative. You want to make sure that when you present them to people, they don't just hear numbers, they see what you mean behind it. They hear the story behind the numbers. They actually get a narrative from what you present, so that when you're presenting things that you have to present, that most people would say are mundane to present, that your audience is actually excited to hear it and they say, okay, that's relevant to me. So here's how you take data in your presentation, numbers, and make them more engaging for your audience to listen to. The first thing to do is reframe. Reframe your numbers, right? You can say 67% of people did this, or you can say 2 out of every 3 people do this, right? So you can even turn it into something fun for your audience. 67% of people have poor memory. You can say 2 out of every 3 people have poor memory. So you look to the person to your right, you look into the person to your left. If it's not them, it's probably you, right? So you can make a statistic exciting as opposed to just giving it. Reframe it in terms of, how you can make this more interesting for your audience. Secondly, tell a story behind it. Tell a story behind the numbers. I once read a story about these guys that bought these 99-cent items and they put them on eBay, and every item cost no more than $1. And they put a bunch of them online and they ended up selling them for thousands of dollars. And the only difference was they added a story to each of the items. They made up the story, but because people were drawn into the story, they were more attracted to the item. So when you present a number, is there a story behind how that number came to be? Is there a story related to that number in any way? If you can share that, it's going to make that data that you present much more palatable to your audience, much more engaging for your audience as well. Next, implications. You want to give your numbers implications. You want to share what that means in the real world. For example, if you say 14% of employees are more engaged at work, that might mean something to some people. But if you say that means 200 people in our company are waking up every morning and excited to come to work. So that 14% now becomes 200 real life people that you're describing and sharing how they actually feel. Instead of using corporate terms, employee engagement, you're saying 200 people are excited. They're motivated. They feel good when they wake up in the morning. So how can you bring those stats to life? You show how it implies to them in the real world, how it applies, and the implications of that number in the real world. And finally, compare. Compare your number that may be unknown or a little bit vague to your audience to something known. In some of my talks, I've mentioned Harriet Tubman, who was a black lady who freed slaves hundreds of years ago. And she participated in the Underground Railroad. She made the Underground Railroad famous, and she would sneak slaves from southern U.S. to Canada by foot. And she went back and forth. She went 19 times, I believe. And sometimes that's hard for people to grasp when I say the distance. And so living in Toronto, I say, imagine walking from Toronto to Barrie by foot. So I give them 2 cities that they know that they've driven between, they understand the distance, and then they can relate back to the story. So saying someone freed slaves hundreds of years ago and they went by foot from one distance to the other may not impress you at first, but when I say imagine walking Toronto to Barrie, so that's 100 kilometers, back and forth 19 times with the risk of death each time, that brings it home. See, I've compared something that is a little bit vague to something crystal clear. So how can you do that with your own numbers? Use these 4 strategies. Turn your numbers into narrative. There are far too many people out there just giving presentations, presenting information without putting any narrative behind it. You do that and you're going to separate yourself from any speaker, any presenter out there.